Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is cajole. Let's take a look at the definition of this verb. The verb cajole is used to describe an action where someone is convincing someone to do something. They perhaps are gently persuading them. It would be a good idea if you did this. This would be a lot of fun, right? Using things to try and convince them to do something. They might also use flattery. So this idea of giving compliments. You're so smart. You're so beautiful. Of course you would decide to do this particular thing. Okay? So the verb cajole is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, I drop the E before I add ing to form cajoling. For the past tense and participle forms of this verb, I'm just going to have a single ed ending there. Our base verb cajole ends in a voiced L sound. This means that our past tense ending is going to make a D sound. And I'm not adding an extra syllable as I say it. It should just sound like this: cajoled, cajoled. Now, there are a few phrasal verbs you might encounter with cajole. One would be to cajole into. This is where we persuade someone into doing a particular action. An example of this: how did you cajole them into cleaning the house? Maybe one parent is talking to another and wants to know, how did you convince the children to help out to clean the house? The next phrasal verb we're going to look at is to cajole out of. This can have a couple different meanings. The first is going to be the opposite of cajole into. So if I can cajole someone out of something, I'm persuading them not to do a particular action. An example of this: can I cajole you out of leaving so early? So here I'm sort of asking, can I persuade? Could I convince? Could I flatter you so that you don't leave this particular event early? A second way you'll hear cajole out of used is to mean to persuade someone to abandon something or get rid of something. An example of this: fraudsters have cajoled thousands out of their cash through fake charity scams. Sometimes this happens through social media, where someone posts a really moving story. Somebody needs help with medical bills, and you think, oh, I want to help out. But it's not a real fundraiser, it's a scam. And so you have been persuaded to essentially get rid of your own money, to donate it to someone who doesn't need it, but who is trying to scam you or steal your money. Now, let's continue using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today, we'll practice the simple past tense and the present perfect. Let's start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to describe an action that occurred at some known point in the past. Many times you'll see time signals, words like yesterday, or phrases like last week, or maybe even a specific date in the past. Okay? All of those things are signaling to us that we know when a particular action was completed, but not every simple past tense sentence is going to have a time signal. The nice thing about the simple past tense is that our structure is going to be the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, I'm going to have my subject, and then I'm going to have that ed form of the verb. Here's an example sentence: she cajoled all of her friends into attending last night's charity event. So maybe she flattered her friends. She persuaded them that they needed to participate in this particular event. Now, if you want to make a negative simple past tense sentence, our structure is to have our subject, then did not, and then the base verb. You can see that in a very simple sentence here. They didn't cajole me. So here, someone might be kind of defensive. Like, this was my own decision. I wasn't persuaded. They didn't flatter me and convince me I needed to do something. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question. To do this, I start with did, then I have my subject, and then the base verb. always like to point out to students, notice in the negative and the yes or no question, I'm not using the ed form of the verb. I go back to the base verb here. So an example sentence, did your company cajole workers with cash incentives to get the COVID-19 vaccine? So many companies did this. They offered different amounts of money in order to help persuade more people to get the initial rounds of the vaccines. Now let's talk about the present perfect. Sometimes we use this verb tense to talk about an action that started in the past and continues into the present. We might also use it to describe an action that occurred at some unknown point in the past tense. Many times this gets called the indefinite past. To make the present perfect, we need to pay attention to our subject. Okay? So our structure, if our subject is I, you, we, or they, will be have, and then the participle form the verb. If our subject is he, she, or it, we'll use has, and then the participle. Here's an example. Workers have cajoled corporate America into adopting policies that reduce greenhouse gases. So, through their words, through their actions, workers have convinced or persuaded their employers we need to be doing things that are good for the environment. So, this might be describing an action continued in the past, still happening in the present. Now let's look at a negative present perfect sentence. To do this, we start with our subject, again paying attention. So if our subject is I, you, we, or they, I'm going to use have not and then the participle, or haven't and then the participle. But if my subject is he, she, or it, I'll use has not and then the participle, or hasn't and then the participle. An example here. He hasn't cajoled them into any decisions. So, despite trying to persuade them, maybe to flatter them, they still have not made a decision. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the present perfect. To do this, I start with have or has, whichever form matches my subject, and that subject comes next. Then we use the participle form of the verb. Here's another example. Have they cajoled you with promises of cash and prizes? Here I'm really I'm asking someone, have you been persuaded? Have you been convinced to do something because you're being promised material things, money or gifts? Now let's spend a moment looking at some words related to our verb cajole. We're going to look at two nouns together. We're going to look at cajolement and cajolery. Both of these nouns refer to the act of cajoling someone. So another way to say that, it refers to persuasion or flattery in order to get someone to do something. I recently read an example where this was used. The sentence was, Mike Pence has direct knowledge of the former president's incessant cajolery to overturn the election results and stop the peaceful transfer of power. Okay. Sentence was done in some articles related to the January 6th investigation and report that was recently released. Now, this sentence could have been, Mike Pence has direct knowledge of the former president's incessant cajolement. It's going to have the exact same meaning. Either one would be fine. Lastly, let's talk about the adverb cajolingly. So we use this adverb to describe something that's being done in a way to persuade or done in a way to flatter someone in order to convince them to do something. An example of this might be, these beaches along the coast are cajolingly beautiful. So here in this sentence, you might notice cajolingly is describing the adjective beautiful. And you might think, how does a beach persuade someone, or how does a beautiful beach? But it might get the person thinking like, wow, I want to live there. I've got to spend more time here. This is just the most beautiful thing I've seen, or the most beautiful place I've been. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope no one had to cajole you to watch all the way to the end. And I sincerely hope you have a great day.